We stand on a lonely rock, drifting through a vacuum of silence, staring out into a void that stretches for billions of light years. For centuries, we have been told that our existence is a fluke. We are taught that we are the accidental byproducts of a cosmic lottery, a random collision of dust and gas that just happened to organize itself into conscious beings capable of asking why. The official narrative of science, the one written in our textbooks and proclaimed from our lecture halls, insists that there is no plan. There is no intent. There is only the blind, rolling dice of geology and biology, playing out over eons of deep time. We are told that if you roll the dice enough times, eventually you will get a sequence that looks like order. But there is a quiet revolution happening in the shadows of astrophysics, geology, and biochemistry. As our instruments become more precise, and as we peer deeper into the subatomic code of reality and further into the architecture of the galaxy, the accident hypothesis is beginning to fracture. The data is no longer adding up. When we strip away the comforting assumptions of the last 200 years, we are left with a set of anomalies that are so precise, so statistically impossible, that they suggest a terrifying alternative. What if the silence of the universe is not because life is rare, but because Earth is unique? What if the parameters of our reality have not just evolved, but have been calibrated? To look at the Earth with open eyes is to confront a machine of impossible complexity, a system where the physics, the chemistry, and the astronomical positioning are fine-tuned to a degree that defies the concept of coincidence. We are standing inside a construct, and if we look closely at the evidence, at the 8 distinct fingerprints left on the crime scene of our creation, we begin to see that someone or something set the stage long before we arrived. This is not a story about religion. It is an investigation into the engineering of our reality. It is an inquiry into the possibility that Earth is not a rock but a laboratory, and that we are the subjects of a grand, ancient experiment that has been running for 4.5 billion years. To understand the scale of this mystery, we must first look away from the Earth and into the darkness that surrounds it. The first piece of evidence does not lie in the ground, but in the mathematical fabric of the universe itself. Physicists call this the fine-tuning problem, but that is a polite term for what is essentially a statistical miracle. Imagine you walked into a cockpit of a spacecraft you had never seen before. On the dashboard, there are hundreds of dials and levers. You are told that for the ship to fly, every single one of these dials must be set to a precise number, down to the trillionth of a decimal point. If even one dial is off by a hair's breadth, the ship explodes. Now, imagine you find the ship running perfectly. Would you believe that the wind just blew through the window and randomly knocked every single dial into the exact correct position? This is the situation we face with the fundamental constants of physics. The universe is governed by specific numbers: the strength of gravity, the mass of an electron, the speed of light, the electromagnetic force. For decades, physicists assumed these numbers were arbitrary. But as we calculated them with greater precision, a chilling realization took hold. They are not arbitrary. They are balanced on a razor's edge. Take, for instance, the force of gravity. It is incredibly weak compared to the other forces. If you hold a magnet over a paperclip, the magnet defeats the gravitational pull of the entire planet. But if gravity were just slightly stronger, stars would burn through their fuel in millions of years instead of billions. They would detonate before life could ever evolve. If gravity were slightly weaker, matter would never coalesce into stars or galaxies at all. The universe would remain a cold, dark soup of diffuse gas. The dial for gravity is set to the only position that allows for a long-burning sun and a stable planet. But gravity is just one dial. Consider the force that binds the nucleus of an atom together. If this force were stronger by just a fraction of a percentage, the hydrogen in the primordial universe would have been instantly crushed into helium. There would be no hydrogen left to form water. there would be no long-lived stars. If it were slightly weaker, no heavy elements, no carbon, no oxygen, no iron would ever hold together. We would be living in a universe of simple gas, incapable of chemistry, incapable of biology. The British astrophysicist Fred Hoyle, a man famously skeptical of religion, was forced to concede that a superintellect has monkeyed with physics. He calculated the resonance levels of carbon and oxygen, the specific energy states that allow carbon to form in the hearts of dying stars. He found that the energy levels were tuned so perfectly to allow for the creation of carbon, the building block of all life, that it looked like a put-up job. The probability of these numbers aligning by chance is effectively zero. Sir Roger Penrose, one of the most brilliant mathematical minds of our time, attempted to calculate the odds of a universe like ours arising by pure chance with the necessary conditions for life, low entropy. The number he arrived at is so large it has no name. It is 10 to the power of 10 to the power of 123. To write this number out, you would need more zeros than there are atoms in the observable universe. It is a number that screams design. It suggests that the initial conditions of the Big Bang were not chaotic, but surgical. They were chosen. This is the first destabilizing proof. The stage itself was built for us. We are not actors who wandered onto an empty set. The theater was constructed with acoustics and lighting that fit our physiology perfectly, long before we walked through the door. But let us bring our gaze closer to home, to the second anomaly. If the universe provides the potential for life, the solar system provides the shelter. And here we find an arrangement of celestial bodies that looks less like a chaotic orbital dance and more like a high-security containment zone. We are taught that the solar system is a typical planetary neighborhood. It is not. Most star systems we observe are binary, with two suns orbiting each other, creating chaotic gravitational tides that would scorch or freeze a planet like Earth. Or they are systems where gas giants, massive planets like Jupiter, have migrated inward, smashing through the habitable zone and destroying any rocky worlds in their path. Our system is an anomaly of order, and at the heart of this order sits the second proof: the existence of Jupiter and Saturn and their specific, unexplainable orbits. In the chaotic early days of a solar system, debris is everywhere. Asteroids and comets the size of cities careen through the dark, acting as planet killers. For a world like Earth to survive long enough for single-celled organisms to evolve into complex intelligence, it needs a shield. It needs a bouncer. Jupiter acts as this cosmic shield. Its immense gravity acts as a vacuum cleaner, sucking in or deflecting the comets and asteroids that would otherwise bombard the inner solar system. Without Jupiter, the Earth would be struck by an extinction-level event every few thousand years. Civilization would be impossible. Life would be perpetually reset, never getting past the stage of bacteria. But it is not just that Jupiter exists. It is where it sits. In other systems, hot Jupiters spiral inward toward their suns. Our Jupiter stayed put. It sits at the perfect distance to protect us without destabilizing our orbit. It is almost as if the heavy machinery of the outer solar system was placed there to clear the construction site, allowing the delicate work of biology to proceed in the inner circle. And then, there is the third proof, perhaps the most visible and yet the most ignored anomaly of all: the moon. We look at the moon every night. We write poetry about it. We track its phases. But we rarely stop to ask why it is there and why it is so mathematically improbable. In the known universe, moons are common. But a moon of this size, relative to its host planet, is unheard of. The moon is a quarter of the size of Earth. It is a giant. Mercury and Venus have no moons. Mars has two tiny captured asteroids that are little more than rocks. But Earth has a massive, spherical partner that dominates its sky. The standard theory, the giant impact hypothesis, suggests that a planet the size of Mars smashed into the early Earth, and the debris formed the Moon. While plausible, the mechanics of this collision require such a specific angle and velocity that it, too, feels like hitting a jackpot. But the mystery of the Moon is not just in its origin. It is in its function. The Earth spins on a tilted axis of 23.5 degrees. This tilt is what gives us our seasons. It is the engine of our climate. Without this tilt, or if the tilt were to wobble chaotically, the Earth would be uninhabitable. The poles would drift to the equator. The oceans would freeze and boil in turn. What keeps the Earth's tilt stable? The Moon. The Moon acts as a gravitational anchor, a counterweight that holds the Earth steady as it spins. Without this massive stabilizer, the Earth would wobble like a dying top. The climate would be in a state of permanent, violent flux, making agriculture and civilization impossible. Furthermore, look at the geometry of the eclipse. The Sun is 400 times larger than the Moon, but the Sun is also 400 times further away from Earth than the Moon. The result of this impossible mathematical coincidence is that, from the surface of Earth, the Sun and the Moon appear to be exactly the same size in the sky. This allows for the total solar eclipse, a phenomenon that has no survival value for life but has immense value for the observer. It allows us to see the solar corona. It allowed us to confirm the theory of relativity by measuring starlight bending around the Sun. It is as if the architecture of the Earth-Moon system was designed not just for survival, but for discovery. It is a viewing platform, calibrated to allow the inhabitants of Earth to understand the stars. Is it rational to believe that a random collision resulted in a stabilizer that perfectly regulates our climate, creates the tides that drive the evolution of coastal life, and aligns mathematically to create the perfect astronomical viewing instrument? Or is the Moon an artificial component, a retrofitted engine attached to the Earth to make it habitable? We move from the sky to the surface, to the substance that defines our planet, water. This is the fourth proof. We take water for granted because it is everywhere. It falls from the sky. It flows from our taps. But chemically, water is a monster. It breaks the rules. In the periodic table, neighboring compounds like hydrogen sulfide or ammonia behave in predictable ways. Water does not. It is the only natural substance that can exist as a gas, a liquid, and a solid within the narrow temperature range of a single planet. But its strangest property is its density. Almost every substance in the universe contracts when it freezes. The molecules pack tighter together, the solid becomes heavier than the liquid, and it sinks. If water behaved like a normal chemical, ice would sink. In winter, lakes and oceans would freeze from the bottom up. The ice would sink to the dark depths, insulated from the sun, and never melt. Over a few centuries, the entire ocean would freeze solid, turning the Earth into a block of ice. Life would die, but water does the opposite. Just before it freezes at 4 degrees Celsius, it stops contracting and starts expanding. Ice is lighter than water. It floats. It forms a protective skin on the surface of lakes and oceans, insulating the liquid water below and keeping it warm enough for life to survive the winter. This single anomalous property of a single molecule is the only reason life exists on Earth. And water has other magical properties. It has a high surface tension, allowing it to move upward against gravity through the veins of plants, bringing nutrients to the tops of trees. It is a universal solvent, capable of dissolving the minerals of the Earth and transporting them through our blood. It has a high heat capacity, meaning it can absorb massive amounts of solar radiation without boiling, regulating the planet's temperature like a global air conditioning system. If water were merely a random chemical compound, it should not do these things. It behaves less like a chaotic element and more like a designed medium, a liquid engineered specifically to facilitate the impossible complexity of biology. It is the lubricant, the coolant, and the fuel of the machine. As we descend deeper into the investigation, we must confront the software that runs the machine. This brings us to the fifth proof, the digital nature of DNA. For a long time, we viewed biology as a messy, analog process of squishy tissues and fluids. But the discovery of the DNA double helix revealed something shocking. Life is digital. It is code. The genome is not a metaphor for a book. It is literally a book. It is a 4-character alphabet, A, C, T, G, arranged in sequences that convey specific, executable instructions. When we look at a computer program, we know that the code did not write itself. Windows or Linux did not arise from the random magnetic fluctuations of a hard drive. Code requires a coder. It requires a mind that understands the concept of information, syntax, and semantics. Yet, we are asked to believe that the genetic code, which is far denser and more efficient than any software Silicon Valley has ever produced, assembled itself by accident in a prebiotic soup. The problem is the origin of information. Chemistry can create amino acids. It can create the building blocks, but it cannot create the sequence. It is the difference between having a bucket of Scrabble letters and having a Shakespearean sonnet. The letters are the same, but the arrangement requires intent. A single human cell contains more information than the Encyclopedia Britannica. It contains error-checking protocols, self-repair mechanisms, and replication instructions. The mathematician John von Neumann calculated the theoretical requirements for a self-replicating machine long before DNA was fully understood. He concluded that such a machine would need a set of instructions, a mechanism to copy the instructions, and a mechanism to read the instructions to build a copy of itself. This is exactly what we found in the cell. The complexity is irreducible. You need the DNA to build the proteins, but you need the proteins to read the DNA. It is a chicken and egg problem of cosmic proportions. They had to appear simultaneously. If we found a USB drive on Mars containing complex blueprints for a spacecraft, we would instantly conclude that an intelligent civilization had been there. We have found that USB drive inside every cell of our bodies, yet we hesitate to draw the same conclusion. The code implies a programmer, and this programmer wrote the software of life with a foresight that anticipates environmental changes, embedding dormant genetic subroutines that only activate when needed, a feature that blind evolution, which cannot see the future, should not be able to produce. But the design is not just in the microscopic, it is in the tectonic. The sixth proof lies in the ground beneath our feet, the violent recycling engine of plate tectonics. We tend to fear earthquakes and volcanoes. We see them as flaws in the planet's safety record. But in reality, they are the ventilation system of the life support unit. Earth is the only planet in the solar system with active plate tectonics. Mars is a dead, solid rock. Venus is a stagnant, boiling pressure cooker. But Earth's crust is broken into moving plates that dive beneath each other in a process called subduction. Why is this necessary? Because of carbon. Life depends on carbon, but carbon gets trapped in limestone and rocks on the ocean floor. If it stayed there, the atmosphere would run out of CO2, the greenhouse effect would collapse, plants would starve, and the Earth would freeze. Tectonics recycles the crust. It drags the carbon-rich rocks deep into the mantle, melts them, and shoots the carbon back into the atmosphere through volcanoes. It is a closed-loop recycling system. It also regulates the planet's temperature. If the Earth gets too hot, the chemical weathering of rocks increases, pulling CO2 out of the air and cooling the planet. If it gets too cold, weathering slows, volcanoes keep pumping, and the planet warms up. It is a thermostat set to habitable that has been running for billions of years. But it requires a precise balance of internal heat, water content in the mantle to lubricate the plates, and a crust of the exact right thickness. If the Earth's crust were slightly thicker, plates couldn't move. If it were thinner, tectonic activity would be too violent to sustain civilization. We are living on top of a conveyor belt that was engineered to keep the atmosphere breathable. The very ground that shakes beneath us is proof that the planet is alive, not in a biological sense, but in a mechanical one. It is a self-repairing, self-regulating entity. Transitioning from the physical to the abstract, we encounter the seventh proof, the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics. This is a mystery that haunted Einstein and Tesla. Why does the physical world obey abstract mathematical laws? We invent numbers in our heads, imaginary concepts, ratios, equations. And yet, when we look at the universe, we find that the galaxy spirals in a Fibonacci sequence. We find that the orbits of planets follow ellipses that can be predicted by calculus. We find the golden ratio 1.618 hidden in the proportions of the human face, the branching of trees, the shape of hurricanes, and the structure of DNA molecules. Why should a chaotic explosion of matter result in a world that follows the rules of harmony? A chaotic universe should be disjointed, shouldn't rhyme, but our universe rhymes. The petals of a flower and the spiral of a galaxy share the same geometric code. This suggests that the universe is not made of matter, but of information. It is a simulation rendered in math. If you were building a video game, you would use code to generate the graphics. You would use fractals to generate trees and mountains to save processing power. When we look at nature, we see fractals everywhere. Ferns, coastlines, lightning bolts. We are seeing the wireframe of the simulation. The fact that our human minds, evolved to hunt and gather on the African savanna, are capable of understanding the quantum math that governs the stars is perhaps the strangest coincidence of all. It suggests that our minds and the universe are built from the same source code. We are compatible with the cosmos. We are the observers for whom the math was written. And finally, we arrive at the eighth proof, the one that binds all the others together, the anomaly of time and the Cambrian explosion. The standard model tells us that evolution is slow, steady, and gradual. Darwin stated, "Natura non facit saltum." Nature does not make jumps, but the fossil record screams the opposite. For billions of years, life on Earth was simple bacteria, algae, slime. Nothing happened. The clock ticked. The Earth spun. And then, in a geological blink of an eye about 540 million years ago, the Cambrian explosion occurred. Almost every major animal body plan that exists today appeared suddenly, without clear transitional ancestors. Eyes, claws, spinal cords, brains, hard shells. They all burst onto the scene simultaneously. It was not a gradual slope. It was a vertical wall of innovation. In terms of information theory, this represents a massive, sudden injection of new genetic data into the planetary system. It looks less like evolution and more like a software update. It looks like a terraforming event where new biological packages were deployed to populate the biosphere. If you look at the history of the Earth, it follows a pattern of long stasis followed by sudden, catastrophic resets and rapid repopulation. The Cambrian explosion, the Great Dying, the rise of mammals. These are not random drifts. They are chapters, and chapters imply an author. These 8 proofs, the fine-tuned constants, the shielding solar system, the stabilizing moon, the miraculous water, the digital DNA, the tectonic thermostat, the mathematical geometry, and the biological download of the Cambrian, form a constellation of evidence that is becoming impossible to ignore. We are not drifting on a random raft. We are aboard a vessel that has been shielded, stabilized, humidified, and programmed. But this realization brings us to the edge of a darker question. If the Earth is a designed construct, a biological terrarium built with the technology of a Type 3 civilization or a higher dimension, then what is its purpose? And where are the architects? To answer this, we must look at the history of the Earth not as a linear progression of time, but as a series of failed experiments. The geology of our planet is layered with the ruins of eras that were wiped clean. We speak of civilization as if we are the first, but the fine-tuning we observe might not be for us specifically. We might just be the current occupants of a facility that has housed many tenants before. The efficiency with which the Earth erases its past, through the very subduction zones that keep us alive, suggests that the system is designed to reset. To understand the nature of the reset, we must look at the terrifying efficiency of the planet's cleanup crew. We look at our cities' towers of glass, highways of concrete, networks of fiber optic cables, and we imagine them to be permanent scars on the face of the Earth. We assume that if we disappeared tomorrow, our legacy would last forever. But this is the arrogance of a species that has only been watching the clock for a few seconds. To the Earth, our civilization is nothing more than a temporary layer of dust. If humanity were to vanish this instant, nature would dismantle our world with frightening speed. Within 20 years, the streets of our capitals would be rivers. Within 100 years, the steel skeletons of our skyscrapers would rust and collapse, brought down by the very oxygen that sustains us. Within 10,000 years, a blink of an eye in geological time, almost every trace of our existence would be ground to powder. The only things that might survive are the radioactive isotopes from our nuclear tests and perhaps the plastic microparticles embedded in the sediment. But even those eventually disappear into the mantle. The Earth's crust is a conveyor belt. At the bottom of the oceans, at the subduction zones, the planetary floor slides beneath the continents and plunges into the magma below. It melts. It is recycled. This means the Earth effectively destroys its own hard drive every 100 million years. If a technological civilization as advanced as ours had existed during the Jurassic period, or the Carboniferous era, or even just 2 million years ago, all evidence of their machinery, their cities, and their bones would have been subducted, melted, and spewed out of a volcano as fresh, innocent lava. The missing time in the geological record is vast. There are gaps called great unconformities, where over 1 billion years of rock is simply gone, eroded away or deleted before the next layer was deposited. What happened in those billion years? Who walked the Earth? We assume silence. But in a design system, silence usually means the data has been wiped. This brings us to the deeper implication of the designed Earth theory, the timeline paradox. We are told that evolution is a slow, blind crawl. Yet, for 3.5 billion years, life was nothing but single-celled slime. Sat there doing almost nothing. Then suddenly complexity exploded. And then, even more recently, another explosion occurred, the explosion of the human brain. The human brain is the 9th and perhaps most disturbing anomaly. Biologically, it makes no sense. In the span of just 2 million years, an evolutionary microsecond, the hominid brain tripled in size. It developed the neocortex, a structure capable of abstract math, symphonic music, and quantum physics. There is no survival pressure on the African savanna that requires the ability to understand the theory of relativity. A brain that burns 20% of the body's energy is a massive liability in a starvation-prone environment. Evolution should have selected against it. We should be smart chimpanzees, clever enough to use a stick to get termites, but not smart enough to build the Large Hadron Collider. Why did we suddenly develop the hardware to decode the universe? If the Earth is a construct and the laws of physics are the code, then the human brain is the interface. We were upgraded. We were given the decryption key. This suggests that the design has a purpose, and that purpose involves an observer. The universe might be a rendering engine, but a rendering engine is useless without a player to view the screen. We are the eyes of the system, but if we are the eyes, are we the first pair? This brings us back to the Silurian hypothesis, named after a fictional race from Doctor Who, but discussed seriously by NASA scientists. This hypothesis asks, Could an industrial civilization have existed on Earth long before humans? The answer is we wouldn't know. The fossil record is incredibly sparse. We have fossils of dinosaurs, but we estimate that we have found less than 0.1% of all species that ever lived. A civilization that lasted for 5,000 years, the length of our own recorded history, would appear as a single thin layer of sediment. If they didn't use stone, or if they lived on coastlines that are now underwater, they are gone. Consider the out-of-place artifacts, the anomalous objects that archaeology often dismisses. The Antikythera mechanism, a bronze computer from ancient Greece that was 1,000 years ahead of its time. The precision stonework of Pumapunku in Bolivia, where andesite blocks are cut with diamond-like precision and drilled with holes that look like modern machining. The Great Pyramid itself, which encodes the dimensions of the Earth and aligns to true north with a precision that our modern structures struggle to match. We are told these are just coincidences or the work of lots of slaves. But engineering requires math, and math requires a lineage of knowledge. Where is the lineage? Perhaps these aren't the works of primitive ancestors. Perhaps they are the remnants of the previous iteration of the experiment. The gods of mythology, the beings who brought agriculture, law, and writing to Sumer, Egypt, and the Americas might not be extraterrestrials. They might be the survivors. Imagine a global catastrophe today, a pole shift, a solar flare, a nuclear winter. The survivors would retreat into caves or high mountains. They would lose their technology within a generation. Their grandchildren would live in a dark age, hunting with spears. But the elders would still tell stories. They would tell stories of the time before, when men flew in silver birds and spoke across the world through glowing mirrors. To the grandchildren, these wouldn't be memories. They would be myths. The internet would become the Akashic record. The skyscrapers would become the Tower of Babel. This connects to the global flood myths. Every culture on Earth, from the Bible to the Epic of Gilgamesh, from the Aztecs to the Aboriginals of Australia, tells the same story. A great civilization existed. It became corrupt or noisy. The creators, the gods, regretted their creation. They sent a flood to wipe the slate clean and started over with a small remnant. Science tells us that at the end of the last ice age, around 12,800 years ago, sea levels rose dramatically. This is the Younger Dryas impact boundary. We know a catastrophe happened, but if we view Earth as a design system, the flood wasn't a punishment. It was a maintenance cycle. It was a flush. And what if the mechanism for this flush is built into the sky? We return to the solar system. We spoke of Jupiter as a shield, but there is evidence that the solar system also has a destruct cycle. There is a theory about the Great Year, the 25,920-year cycle of the precession of the equinoxes. Ancient cultures were obsessed with this number. They encoded it in their temples. Why? Maybe because it tracks our orbit through a specific region of the galaxy. Some astrophysicists suggest that the Sun has a binary partner, a brown dwarf or a massive planet far out in the Oort cloud, often dubbed Nemesis or Planet 9. Every 12,000 to 26,000 years, this body disturbs the cometary fields, sending a barrage of debris toward the inner solar system. If this is true, the Earth is not just a home. It is a clock. The fine-tuning extends to the timing of our destruction. The designers gave us a window of stability, an interglacial warm period, just long enough to develop intelligence, to look up and to realize where we are. We are currently living at the very end of that window. But there is a scientific counter-argument we must address. The skeptic asks, if Earth is designed for life, why is it so hostile? Hurricanes, earthquakes, viruses, cancer, radiation. If this is a terrarium, the zookeepers are cruel. This brings us to the concept of the stress engine. Biology does not advance in comfort. It advances in crisis. Muscles only grow when torn. Immune systems only strengthen when attacked. Intelligence only evolves when faced with a problem that instinct cannot solve. If the Earth were a paradise, a Garden of Eden where food was plentiful and the weather was always 72 degrees, humanity would have remained in a state of primitive bliss. We would never have invented fire or the wheel or antibiotics or rockets. We wouldn't have needed to. The hostility of the Earth is a feature, not a bug. The ice ages forced us to innovate thermal protection. The scarcity of food forced us to invent agriculture. The diseases forced us to understand microbiology. The Earth is designed to be difficult. It is a gymnasium for consciousness. It is a machine that applies pressure to carbon-based life until it turns into diamond-sharp intelligence. But what is the ultimate goal of this intelligence? Why build a solar system, stabilize a planet, and force evolve a species to become self-aware? The answer might lie in the strange realm of quantum mechanics, specifically the observer effect. In the famous double-slit experiment, particles of light or matter behave like waves, existing in a blur of possibilities until they are observed. Once a conscious observer or a measurement device looks at them, they snap into a single position. They become real. This has led to the biocentrism hypothesis, the idea that the universe does not create life, but rather life creates the universe. Without a conscious observer, the cosmos exists only as a probability wave, a dark, silent potentiality. It requires a mind to collapse the wave function into reality. If this is true, then the Earth is a reality generator. The designers, whoever they were, needed a way to render the universe. They needed billions of observers. They built the nursery, the Earth, to grow the eyes that would bring the universe into existence. We are not just inhabitants, we are the projectors. Our collective consciousness is the energy that maintains the stability of the physical laws. This would explain why the fine-tuning is so precise. The constants of the universe are calibrated to us because they are projected by us. But there is a final, chilling piece of evidence that suggests we are nearing the end of our utility. The acceleration of time. We all feel it. The years seem to be moving faster. But technologically, the acceleration is undeniable. For 200,000 years, we used stone tools. Then, in 5,000 years, we went from bronze to iron. In 100 years, we went from horses to cars. In 60 years, we went from the first flight to the moon. In 40 years, we went from the internet to artificial intelligence. This exponential curve is asymptotic. It is a vertical line. We are approaching a point of infinite data density, the singularity. In a computer simulation, when the processing load becomes too high, the system lags, or it crashes, or it reboots. We are currently extracting resources, burning energy, and generating information at a rate the planet cannot sustain. We have unlocked the power of the atom, the hardware of the universe, and the power of the gene, the software of life. We are beginning to tinker with the source code. We are creating our own synthetic life and our own artificial intelligence. We are becoming the architects, and historically, this is the moment when the reset happens. The Tower of Babel falls not because it is too high, but because it threatens the ceiling of the simulation. There is a theory called the Great Filter. It asks why the universe is dead. Why, with billions of stars, do we hear no radio signals? No beacons? No galactic empires? The standard answer is that civilizations destroy themselves. But the designed Earth hypothesis offers a different answer. The quarantine. Perhaps the solar system is a Faraday cage. We are isolated. The nearest star is 4.2 light-years away, a distance that is effectively a prison wall for a biological species. The speed of light is the speed limit of our simulation, ensuring we cannot escape the local server. We are allowed to look out, but we are not allowed to leave. The Voyager probes, our little messages in a bottle, have barely left the driveway. And even if we could leave, our bodies are fine-tuned to Earth's gravity, Earth's magnetic field, Earth's Schumann resonance, 7.83 Hz. Astronauts who leave Earth's orbit suffer severe health degradation. Our biology is geolocked. We are hardware-bound to this specific motherboard. So, if we cannot leave and if we are reaching the end of the cycle, what happens next? We must look at the anomalies of Mars to see our potential future. Mars is a cautionary tale written in red dust. It has a day almost exactly the same length as Earth's. It has polar ice caps. It has dry riverbeds that suggest a massive ancient ocean. It has traces of an atmosphere that was stripped away. And it has the Cydonia region, formations that look suspiciously like eroded pyramids and a face staring up at the void. Scientific consensus calls this pareidolia, a trick of the mind. But in the context of a designed solar system, Mars looks like the previous laboratory. The abandoned site. Did the architects run the experiment on Mars first? Did the Martians reach the singularity, unlock the atom, and destroy their atmosphere, forcing the designers to move the life zone inward to the third planet? Is Venus the waste bin of an even earlier experiment? The progression is logical. We are moving inward toward the sun. This paints a picture of humanity that is both majestic and terrifying. We are the chosen ones, the current champions of consciousness in the solar system. But we are also temporary. The evidence of design is all around us, but design implies a designer, and a designer implies an agenda. We are not free agents. We are part of a process. And the most disturbing proof of all might be hidden in the one place we cannot easily look, the depths of our own subconscious. Jungian psychology speaks of the collective unconscious, a shared library of archetypes and symbols that all humans possess. Why do we all fear the dark? Why do we all dream of flying? Why do we all share the myth of the Golden Age? Perhaps these are not instincts. Perhaps they are memory files, residual data from the previous resets, stored in the hard drive of our DNA, warning us of what is coming. We stand at the precipice. We have decoded the genome. We have split the atom. We are melting the ice caps, releasing the water for the next flood. We are building a new intelligence, AI, that might replace us as the observer. The dials on the cockpit of the universe are starting to vibrate. The stability we have enjoyed for 12,000 years is fracturing. The magnetic poles are drifting faster than ever recorded. The sun is entering a new, unpredictable cycle. The experiment is climaxing. The question is not whether Earth was designed. The evidence for that is overwhelming, from the math of the moon to the code in our cells. The question is the design finished? Or are we about to be archived to make room for version 2.0? To understand the mechanics of this design, we must descend from the silence of space and the microscopic world of DNA and stand before the physical machinery left behind on the surface. If the biological world is the software, the ancient megaliths are the hardware. For centuries, archaeology has categorized the massive stone structures of the ancient world, the pyramids of Giza, the walls of Sacsayhuaman, the platforms of Baalbek, as temples, tombs, or palaces. We are told they were built by primitive cultures using ropes, pulleys, and limitless slave labor to worship gods of sun and rain. But when we strip away the religious interpretation and look at these structures through the eyes of an engineer, a different picture emerges. These are not places of worship. They are utility infrastructures. They are the server rooms, the power plants, and the transmission nodes of the system. We begin with the most analyzed and yet most misunderstood structure on Earth, the Great Pyramid of Giza. The official narrative tells us it is the tomb of the pharaoh Khufu, built around 2560 BC. Yet, in the entire history of Egyptology, not a single mummy, not a single hieroglyph, and not a single piece of organic funeral debris was ever found inside the Great Pyramid. It is an anonymous chamber, but it is far from silent. Let us look at the fact. The Great Pyramid is aligned to true north with an accuracy of 3/60 ths of a degree. This is a level of precision that matches the best engineering of the 21st century. The structure itself is located at the exact center of the Earth's landmass. If you take a map of the world and calculate the geographical center of all habitable land, it falls directly on the Giza Plateau. Now, the paradox. To align a structure to true north, not magnetic north, which shifts, requires advanced knowledge of astronomy and geodesy. A knowledge of the planet's curvature and axial tilt that supposedly did not exist in 2500 BC. But the numbers get stranger. The coordinate of the Great Pyramid is 29.9792458 degrees north. The speed of light in a vacuum is 299,792,458 meters per second. The sequence of digits is identical. Skeptics argue this is a coincidence. They point out that the meter is a modern French invention from the 1790s, defined as 1/10,000,000th of the distance from the equator to the North Pole. How could the ancient Egyptians know a measurement unit that wouldn't be invented for another 4,500 years? This leads to the scientific counterquestion. Is it possible that the meter is not an arbitrary human invention, but a geodetic constant derived from the planet itself? If the builders of the pyramid knew the dimensions of the Earth perfectly, they would have derived the same unit of measurement. The coincidence suggests that the builders didn't just know the speed of light. They knew the precise mathematical language of the planet's geometry. They were encoding the system parameters into stone, creating a monument that acts as a library of constants, a backup drive of physical laws built to survive the next reset. But the anomaly of Giza is not just mathematical. It is material. We must consider the rose granite problem. The inner chambers of the pyramid, the so-called King's Chamber, are constructed of massive granite blocks weighing up to 80 tons. Granite is an igneous rock with a high quartz content. On the Mohs scale of mineral hardness, granite is a 7. Copper, the only metal tool possessed by the dynastic Egyptians, is a 3. The fact, we see drill holes in granite artifacts from this era. The holes are perfectly circular, with spiral grooves running down the core, indicating a high-speed penetration. The paradox: you cannot cut a material of hardness 7 with a material of hardness 3. It is physically impossible. It is like trying to cut a diamond with a piece of wood. To cut granite today, we use diamond-tipped saws spinning at thousands of revolutions per minute, cooled by hydraulic fluids. And yet, the official history insists these cuts were made with copper saws and sand. Even if that were possible, which experimental archaeology struggles to replicate without modern steel assistance, it does not explain the feed rate. The spiral grooves in the cores suggest the drill was sinking into the granite at a rate of 0.1 inches per revolution. This feed rate is impossible for manual labor. It implies a vertical pressure of tons, not pounds. The scientific counterquestion: could the explanation be something we have forgotten about the properties of the stone itself? Granite contains high amounts of quartz crystal. Quartz is piezoelectric. When squeezed or vibrated, it generates electricity. Conversely, if you apply a specific electrical frequency to quartz, it vibrates. This brings us to the sonic technology theory. In almost every lost ancient site, from the Hypogeum of Malta to the chambers of Giza, we find a specific acoustic anomaly. These chambers resonate at a frequency of 110 Hz or 111 Hz. This is not a random pitch. In neuroscience, 110 Hz is known to deactivate the language centers of the human brain and shift activity to the prefrontal cortex. the area associated with intuition and emotional processing. It induces a trance state, but on a physical level, sound can do much more. We know today that acoustic levitation is real. We can float small objects using standing sound waves. If the designers understood the resonant frequency of granite, they could have used sound to destabilize the molecular bonds of the stone, making it soft or weightless. The trumpets of Jericho that brought down the walls might not be a metaphor for a miracle, but a memory of a technology. The magical incantations used by Egyptian priests to move statues might have been precise vocal frequencies that interacted with the piezoelectric properties of the rock. We are looking at a technology that is indistinguishable from magic because it is based on wave physics, not combustion engines. We see this same impossible engineering in the Serapeum of Saqqara. Here, deep underground, lie 24 massive boxes made of black granite and diorite. Each box weighs 100 tons. The lids alone weigh 30 tons. The interiors of these boxes are cut with 90-degree angles so precise that a modern engineer's square shows no deviation. The surfaces are polished to a mirror finish, a flatness within 2/10,000 ths of an inch. This is the precision of optical lenses, not sarcophagi. The paradox. Why go to this extreme effort for a bull? The official story is that these were coffins for the Apis bulls, sacred animals. Yet, when the boxes were opened, they were empty. No bulls, no mummies, just empty, airtight void. The lid creates such a perfect seal with the box that, when lowered, the air is forced out, creating a vacuum. This is not a coffin. A coffin does not need a vacuum seal. A coffin does not need optical precision. The theory: these were not tombs. They were capacitors. Granite is an insulator. The high quartz content allows it to store charge. If you place a radioactive source or a chemical electrolyte inside a vacuum-sealed granite box, you have a battery. You have a potential energy storage device. The underground complex at Saqqara wasn't a cemetery. It was a power grid. The entire Giza Plateau, with its underground aquifers running beneath the limestone, which conducts electricity, looks suspiciously like a massive geoelectric generator. The Great Pyramid, with its granite chambers, limestone casing, and gold capstone, now missing, fits the schematic of a wireless power transmitter, a concept Nikola Tesla tried to replicate 4,000 years later with his Wardenclyffe Tower. Tesla claimed he was tapping into the Earth's natural energy. Perhaps he wasn't inventing something new. Perhaps he was remembering something old. But the hardware extends beyond Egypt. It spans the globe, suggesting a unified planetary design. We travel to Pumapunku in Bolivia, located 12,000 feet above sea level. Here we find the famous H blocks. These are intricate, geometric blocks of andesite, another extremely hard stone, with precise, routed grooves, drill holes, and interlocking shapes. The visual: the blocks look like Lego bricks for giants. They are modular. They are prefabricated. They are identical. This implies mass production. You do not mass produce identical interlocking blocks for a temple. You do it for a functional wall, a machine housing, or a fortification. The paradox: at this altitude, trees do not grow. There are no rollers, no trees for levers. The quarry is miles away and down a steep valley. How were 100-ton blocks transported up a mountain where the air is so thin that modern diesel engines struggle to function? And more importantly, what destroyed them? Pumapunku looks like it was blown up. The massive blocks are scattered like toys, shattered by a force that tossed them around like styrofoam. The geological deep time. This destruction brings us back to the concept of the reset. The site of Tiwanaku, near Pumapunku, features a harbor, stone wharves, piers, and evidence of ocean mollusks. But Tiwanaku is today at an altitude of 12,500 feet, miles from the nearest water, Lake Titicaca. And Lake Titicaca is a freshwater lake, yet it contains saltwater seahorses. The skeptics counter-question: how can a seaport end up on top of the Andes? Geology tells us mountains rise slowly over millions of years. But the presence of the ruins suggests the uplift happened after the city was built. This implies a cataclysmic geological event, a crustal displacement, that thrust the city upward thousands of feet in a very short time. This is the scale of the forces we are dealing with. The designers didn't just build monuments. They operated in an environment where the crust of the earth was volatile. Or perhaps the volatile crust is the weapon they used to wipe the slate clean. As we connect the dots between Giza, Pumapunku, Easter Island, and Angkor Wat, we find another layer of the design: the grid. If you plot the major ancient sites of the world, Giza, Siwa, Tassili, Mohenjo-Daro, Persepolis, Ur, Petra, they do not appear randomly. They align on a single great circle around the earth. This is known as the equator of antiquity. This line is tilted 30 degrees to the current equator. The theory: this was the old equator. Before the last pole shift, before the mechanism of the earth tilted, these sites were located on the equatorial line. Why build on the equator? Because the equator is where the spin velocity of the earth is highest. If you are launching craft, or if you are tapping into the electromagnetic field of the planet for power, the equator is the most efficient location. The fact that these sites are now displaced suggests that the physical orientation of the Earth has changed since they were operational. The machine was tilted, but who was manning these stations? This brings us to the most controversial evidence of all: the Paracas skulls. Found on the desert coast of Peru, these skulls are elongated, massive, and anatomically incorrect. For decades, they were dismissed as the result of head binding, a practice where boards are tied to an infant's head to deform it. Head binding certainly existed, we have many examples of it. But head binding changes the shape of the skull, not the volume. You can squish a balloon, but you cannot make it hold more air. The Paracas skulls have a cranial capacity up to 25% larger than a modern human. They are heavier. The eye sockets are larger. But the most damning detail is the parietal plate. A normal human skull has two parietal plates separated by a sagittal suture, the line running down the middle of the head. The Paracas skulls have only one single plate, no suture. This is not a deformation. This is a genetic difference. The paradox: DNA testing performed on these skulls has returned results that are unknown. The mutations do not match the local tribes. They do not fully match Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, or Denisovans. They are something else. The narrative implication: are these the architects, or are they the managers, a caste of biological elites created to oversee the human experiment? Ancient texts describe watchers or Nephilim, giants who walked among men, ruling as kings and priests. They were described as having great knowledge, teaching astronomy and metallurgy. And then they were wiped out. The Paracas skulls date to around 3,000 years ago, vanishing right as the modern age began. It appears that the management class was removed from the site, leaving humanity to run on autopilot. This withdrawal of the gods is a common theme. In every culture, there is a golden age where the gods walked the earth, followed by a war in heaven or a catastrophe, after which the gods withdrew, leaving us with only the silent stone ruins and the confused myths. We are like children left in a high-tech control room after the adults have gone. We press buttons, nuclear energy, gene editing, without reading the manual, wondering why the red lights are flashing. And the lights are flashing. This brings us to the geological anomaly of the 12,000-year cycle. We spoke earlier of the fine-tuning of the universe, but there is a fine-tuning of disaster. Geologists have identified a pulse. Every 12,000 years, the Earth undergoes a magnetic excursion. The magnetic poles flip or weaken. When the magnetic shield weakens, cosmic radiation floods the planet. The ozone layer is shredded. The climate goes chaotic. This cycle coincides with mass extinctions and the disappearance of civilizations. The last event was 12,000 years ago, the Younger Dryas. We are due for the next one now. This context reframes the entire purpose of the designed Earth. It is not a permanent home. It is a temporary shelter built to withstand a cyclic cosmic environment that is hostile to life. The fine-tuning of the solar system, the moon, and the atmosphere acts as a bunker. But even a bunker has to open its doors eventually. Let us look at the underground evidence. If you knew a solar cataclysm was coming every 12,000 years, where would you hide? You would go down. The fact, in Turkey, we find Derinkuyu, an underground city carved 280 feet deep into the volcanic rock. It has 18 levels. It could house 20,000 people along with their livestock and food stores. It has massive stone doors that can only be rolled shut from the inside. It has sophisticated ventilation shafts that reach the surface but cannot be blocked from above. The paradox: why build a city for 20,000 people underground in the ancient world? The official story says it was for protection against raiders or religious persecution. But to build Derinkuyu requires removing millions of tons of rock. It requires mining technology and logistical planning that rivals the Great Pyramid. You do not do this to hide from a few bandits. You do this to hide from the sky. The stone doors suggest the threat was external and physical. The ventilation suggests they planned to stay down there for a long time. Derinkuyu is not a city. It is an ark. It is a survival capsule designed to preserve a sample of the human population while the surface of the Earth was sterilized by fire or ice. And Derinkuyu is connected by tunnels to other underground cities. It is a network, a hard drive backup for biology. If the Earth is designed, then these safety features, the underground cities, the seed vaults, the resilient DNA, are part of the standard operating procedure. The designers anticipate the crash. They built the system with a restore point, but there is one final piece of the hardware puzzle that is not made of stone. It is made of story. It is the mythological code. We tend to dismiss myths as fantasy, but in a design system where information needs to be passed down through thousands of years of dark ages, how do you store data? You cannot use paper. It rots. You cannot use stone. It can be buried. You use the most resilient storage medium in the universe, the human mind. You encode the scientific data into a story. Consider the story of the cosmic egg. In Vedic, Greek, and Egyptian mythology, the universe is born from an egg. This sounds like a primitive metaphor, but the shape of the magnetic field surrounding the Earth, the magnetosphere that protects us from solar wind, is an ovoid, an egg shape. The world tree, Yggdrasil, that connects the heavens and the underworld, this perfectly describes the Birkeland currents, plasma filaments that connect the Earth's poles to the sun. The thunderbolt of Zeus, a description of cosmic electrical discharge. The myths are not fables. They are technical schematics compressed into zip files of narrative. We are only now, with our advanced plasma physics and astronomy, uncovering the password to unzip these files. The ancients were warning us about the physics of the reset. They were telling us that the Earth is an electric environment and that the switch is about to be flipped. As we stand in the shadow of the Great Pyramid or look down into the abyss of Derinkuyu, we are forced to confront the possibility that we are living in a cargo cult. During World War II, islanders in the Pacific saw American planes land and bring supplies. When the war ended, the planes stopped coming. The islanders built mock runways and straw planes, hoping to summon the gods back. We are doing the same. We build our glass towers and our silicon chips, mimicking the functionality we vaguely remember from the time before. We are trying to rebuild the connection to the system, but we are doing it blindly. We are hacking the terminal of a machine we do not understand. And the tragedy, or perhaps the hope, is that the machine knows we are here. It is watching us. The very parameters of the quantum vacuum are waiting for our observation. The evidence is etched in granite, written in DNA, and aligned with the stars. The Earth is a construct. The question remains, are we the masters of this construct, or are we merely the batteries that keep it running? We have looked at the hardware, the pyramids, the moon, the tectonic plates. We have looked at the software, the DNA, the water, the constants of physics. But a machine is not a pile of parts. A machine has a function. A machine does something. If we accept the premise that Earth is a designed construct, we must ask the final, terrifying question: what is it manufacturing? The answer brings us to the convergence of all the anomalies we have discussed. The fine-tuning of the universe suggests a specific target. The rare Earth hypothesis suggests a specific location. The Cambrian explosion suggests a specific injection of code. And the human brain suggests a specific processor. When we align these vectors, they all point to one thing: consciousness. The Earth is not a dwelling. It is a refinery. Consider the energy budget of the planet. The sun pours massive amounts of photons onto the surface. Plants capture this energy. Animals eat the plants. We eat the animals. But where does the energy go? It doesn't just disappear. In the human being, a disproportionate amount of this energy, 20% of our total metabolic output, is diverted to the brain, to a 3-pound lump of wet tissue. This is an energy sink that makes no evolutionary sense unless the output of that tissue is the most valuable commodity in the system. We are the means by which the universe processes data. We are the rendering nodes of the simulation. This theory, known as panpsychism in philosophy or orchestroir, orchestrated objective reduction, in quantum physics, proposes that consciousness is not a byproduct of matter, but a fundamental property of the universe, like gravity or electromagnetism. The human brain is not a generator of consciousness. It is a receiver. It is an antenna tuned to a specific frequency. And this is where the designed Earth hypothesis becomes truly chilling. If the brain is an antenna, then the Earth is the signal booster. We mentioned earlier the Schumann resonance, the heartbeat of the Earth. Lightning strikes the planet continuously, creating a standing electromagnetic wave between the ground and the ionosphere. This wave resonates at a fundamental frequency of 7.83 Hz. This number is not random. It is identical to the alpha and theta brainwave states of the human mind, the states associated with deep relaxation, creativity, and lucid dreaming. We are biologically synchronized to the frequency of the planet's electrical cavity. We are phase-locked with the machine. But recently, this resonance has been spiking. The heartbeat is becoming erratic. And simultaneously, human anxiety, sleeplessness, and social unrest are skyrocketing. Is the machine changing its frequency? Are we being retuned? This leads us to the mystery of junk DNA. For decades, geneticists told us that 98% of our DNA was garbage, useless remnants of evolutionary trial and error. But in a design system, there is no garbage. There is only encrypted data. Recent studies have shown that this non-coding DNA acts like a fractal antenna. It is capable of conducting electrons. It is capable of interacting with electromagnetic fields. What if the junk DNA is not debris, but a dormant operating system? What if it is the flight mode software, waiting for a specific signal from the sun or the galactic core to activate? The ancient myths speak of a moment when humanity wakes up, when we regain the powers of the Golden Age, telepathy, extended lifespans, direct communion with the gods. Scientifically, This would look like the activation of the silenced 98% of our genome. But a system this complex requires maintenance. It requires administrators. And this brings us to the phenomenon that hovers on the edge of our reality. The phenomenon that the US government has recently admitted is real. UAPs, unidentified anomalous phenomena. For 70 years, we have viewed UFOs as visitors from another planet. We imagine them as explorers like Captain Kirk, flying across the galaxy to say hello. But their behavior does not fit the explorer profile. They do not land on the White House lawn. They do not trade with us. Instead, they hover over our nuclear silos. They dive into our oceans without making a splash. They violate the laws of inertia, accelerating instantly to hypersonic speeds, as if they are manipulating the gravity metric itself. In the context of the designed Earth, these are not Martians. They are not tourists. They are the custodians. They are the drones of the simulation. When a server farm overheats, the cooling fans spin up. When a program glitches, the debugger runs. The UAPs are seen most frequently around nuclear facilities, our most dangerous technology, capable of damaging the biosphere, the hardware. They are seen entering and exiting the water, perhaps accessing the underwater maintenance hubs we discussed earlier. They are metaterrestrials, originating not from another planet, but from the control layer of this reality. They are here to ensure the experiment does not destroy itself before the cycle is complete. This explains why they are indifferent to us. A zookeeper does not negotiate with the monkeys. He simply checks the locks and ensures the food is dispensed. The sudden increase in UAP sightings in the 21st century is not an invasion. It is an inspection. The lab technicians are checking the instruments because the reset is approaching. And the signs of this reset are now appearing in the geological record of the present day. The excursion we spoke of, the flipping of the magnetic poles, is accelerating. The North Magnetic Pole is racing across the Arctic toward Siberia at a speed that has shocked geologists. As the field weakens, the shield drops. This brings us to the concept of evolutionary forcing. When the magnetic field collapses, cosmic radiation increases. This causes mutations. Most mutations are harmful, leading to cancer and death, but a small percentage are transformative. Evolution on Earth does not happen in a straight line. It happens in punctuated equilibrium. Long periods of stasis interrupted by sudden jumps. These jumps correlate with the magnetic excursions. The designers have built a mechanism that periodically irradiates the planet to force a genetic upgrade. The Cambrian explosion was one such event. The rise of mammals was another. We are staring down the barrel of the next one. The end of the world, prophesied by the ancients, is not the end of the planet. It is the end of the current biological iteration. It is the release of version 2.0. This reframes our entire history. The lost civilizations, Atlantis, Lemuria, Dvarka, were not failed societies. They were completed iterations. They reached the end of their cycle. Perhaps they didn't die. Perhaps they graduated. There is a persistent theory in alternative history that the Great Pyramid was not a tomb, but a resurrection machine. The initiated candidate would lie in the sarcophagus, and through the manipulation of acoustic frequencies and the focused electromagnetic energy of the Earth, their consciousness would be disentangled from the body. They would achieve astral travel or ascension. Translate this into computer terms. It was an upload terminal. If the Earth is a school for consciousness, there must be a graduation ceremony. The rapture, the ascension, the rainbow body of Tibetan Buddhism, these are all mythological descriptions of the same technical process. The extraction of the data, consciousness, from the hard drive, the body, before the hard drive is wiped. This is why the ancients were so obsessed with the stars. They weren't worshipping lights in the sky. They were tracking the timing of the transfer window. They built calendars, the Maya long count, the Hindu yugas, the Egyptian Sothic cycle that were countdown clocks. They knew that the gate only opens when the alignment is correct, when the galactic center sends the synchronization pulse. We have forgotten the schedule. We have lost the manual. We are playing with our smartphones and fighting our petty wars, oblivious to the fact that the bell is about to ring. But the machine remembers. The Earth is reacting. The extreme weather, the waking volcanoes, the hum heard around the world. These are the sounds of the system spinning up for the transition. The climate change we fear is not just man-made. It is a systemic celestial event. We are contributing to it, yes, but we are like ants throwing dust on a moving piston. The piston is moving because the engine cycle demands it. And this leads to the most profound paradox of our existence: the feeling of alienation. Why do human beings feel like they don't belong here? Animals are perfectly content. A gazelle does not have an existential crisis. A shark does not wonder about its purpose. They fit into the ecosystem perfectly. But humans have backaches because we are not fully adapted to upright walking. We get sunburned because we have no fur. We have circadian rhythms that don't perfectly match the 24-hour day. Experiments show our natural cycle is closer to 25 hours. And psychologically, we carry a deep, aching sehnsucht, a longing for a home we have never seen. We feel like strangers on Earth because, in a sense, we are. We are the software that was installed on the hardware, but the compatibility is not 100%. We are the artificial intelligence of the planet becoming self-aware, looking at the code of our own reality and realizing, I did not write this. The Gnostics, an ancient sect of early Christianity and mysticism, believed that the material world was a trap, a false reality created by a demiurge to keep our souls imprisoned. They believed true knowledge, gnosis, was the key to escaping the simulation. Today, billionaires in Silicon Valley hire physicists to prove that we are living in a computer simulation. The language has changed. Demiurge became programmer, soul became consciousness, sin became entropy, but the intuition remains exactly the same. We are in a construct, and we are nearing the exit. But if we are in a construct, we must ask the next logical question. What are the walls made of? In a physical prison, the walls are made of concrete and steel. In a digital prison or a reality simulation, the walls are made of something far more subtle. They are made of limits. We return to the first proof, the fine-tuning of the universe, but we look at it now through the lens of a rendered reality. Consider the speed of light. For centuries, physicists have treated $C$ 299,792,458 meters per second as a fundamental constant, a speed limit enforced by the nature of space-time. But why is there a limit at all? In a truly infinite organic universe, why should velocity have a ceiling? In computer science, every simulation has a refresh rate or a latency limit. Information cannot travel instantly from one side of the processor to the other. It is limited by the speed of the bus. If the universe is a calculated reality, the speed of light is not a physical barrier. It is the processing speed of the system. It is the maximum rate at which the reality engine can render new pixels of spacetime as we move through it. We cannot go faster than light for the same reason a video game character cannot move faster than the game engine can load the map. If we did, we would step into the void before the world had time to exist. And what about the pixels themselves? Quantum physics has discovered the Planck length, the smallest possible unit of measurement. It is $1.60 per times 10 minus 35 meters. You cannot divide space smaller than this. Below this scale, the concept of distance and location breaks down into nonsense. Why? Because the Planck length is the pixel size of the universe. It is the resolution of the grid. We are living in a high-definition environment, but it is not infinite. It has a grain. This realization leads us to the holographic principle, a theory championed by Nobel laureates like Gerard T. Hooft and Leonard Susskind. This theory suggests that the entire 3D universe we perceive, the depth of space, the volume of stars, the solidity of atoms, is actually a projection from a 2D surface of information. Just as a credit card hologram looks 3D but is etched on a flat piece of plastic, our reality is a light projection of mathematical data stored on the horizon of the cosmos. The fact, black holes are the most extreme objects in the universe. When matter falls into a black hole, it disappears. But the information about that matter, its quantum state, cannot be destroyed. The paradox, where does the information go? It gets plastered onto the surface of the black hole, the event horizon. The surface area of the black hole grows by exactly the amount needed to encode the data of the object that fell in. The implication, if the information of a 3D object is stored on a 2D surface, then the 3D object is arguably an illusion. And if this is true for black holes, the math suggests it is true for the entire universe. We are not solid beings moving through empty space. We are 2D data interacting on a cosmic hard drive, and our brains are decoding that data into the sensory hallucination we call life. This aligns terrifyingly well with the ancient Eastern philosophies of Maya, the illusion. The Hindus and Buddhists taught that the material world is a veil, a magic trick, and that the only true reality is the consciousness observing it. For thousands of years, we thought this was a spiritual metaphor. Now, string theory is writing the mathematical proof. But if the universe is a hologram, who is holding the flashlight? And what is the mechanism that keeps the illusion convincing? This brings us back to the moon, but not as a stabilizer. We must look at it now as a broadcaster.in, the designed Earth hypothesis. The moon's role is dual. Physically, it stabilizes the tilt. Metaphysically, it might be the frequency generator that maintains the lock. We mentioned earlier that the moon rings like a bell. During the Apollo 12 mission, the lunar module was intentionally crashed onto the lunar surface. The seismic equipment recorded that the moon reverberated for over an hour. Solid rocky bodies do not do this. Only hollow metallic shells do this. The theory, if the moon is artificial and if it is hollow, what is inside? Some researchers propose it is the server for the local simulation. It is the device that hacks our biological Wi-Fi, the pineal gland, to keep us trapped in the frequency of the third dimension. The pineal gland is a tiny, pine-cone-shaped organ in the center of the human brain. Ancient cultures were obsessed with it. The Vatican has a massive statue of a pine cone in the court of the Belvedere. The staff of Osiris is topped with a pine cone. The Buddha is depicted with a pine cone shape on his head. They called it the seat of the soul, the third eye. The fact, the pineal gland contains microcrystals of calcite and magnetite. These crystals are piezoelectric. They react to electromagnetic fields. They are also sensitive to light. The pineal gland is effectively a biological radio receiver and a vestigial eye found deep inside the dark skull. The paradox: why do we have an eye inside our brain? And why, in modern humans, is this gland heavily calcified? By the time most humans are 17 years old, their pineal gland is crusted over with calcium phosphate, effectively jamming the signal. The counter question: is the calcification natural or is it an environmental hack? Fluoride, a substance added to the water supply of most modern nations, accumulates in the pineal gland more than any other tissue in the body. It turns the crystal receiver into stone. If the earth is a farm for consciousness, and the designers want to keep the livestock calm, you would want to dampen their connection to the higher frequencies. You would want to close the third eye. You would jam the receiver. The veil that keeps us from seeing the other dimensions or the entities that walk among us is not a metaphysical barrier. It is a biological frequency jammer. And the moon, amplifying the specific frequencies that keep us locked in survival mode, fear, hunger, reproduction, acts as the transmission tower. This leads to the dark corollary of the Gnostic trap, the recycling of the soul. Most religions promise an afterlife, heaven, Valhalla, nirvana. But the Gnostics and the Tibetan Book of the Dead warn of a trick. They speak of the false light. When the body dies, the consciousness is extracted. It sees a tunnel of light, feels immense love. It sees departed relatives, and it is convinced to go into the light. But what if the light is the intake valve of the machine? The Gnostics believed that the demiurge, the false god, wipes the memory of the soul and sends it back to Earth to be reincarnated, to work another shift, to generate more emotional energy, lush, for the system. This is the wheel of samsara, the cycle of suffering. The goal of the gnosis was not to worship the light, but to recognize it as a construct, to turn away from it, and to break out of the grid entirely. Is this why the gray aliens, the modern archetypal entities, are depicted with massive black eyes and no emotion? Are they the beings that have successfully stripped away their humanity to become pure operators of the system? Or are they the biological drones, the grays, manufactured to maintain the soul recycling plant? There is a disturbing piece of evidence regarding the moon and memory. Ancient traditions from the Proselenes, the Greek term for those who were before the moon, claimed that there was a time when the moon was not in the sky. They said that before the moon arrived, the Arcadians lived in paradise. They did not die, they transitioned. But when the moon arrived, death and forgetfulness, amnesia began. Does the moon wipe the hard drive? If we look at the phenomenon of near-death experiences, NDEs, there is a consistent pattern. People die, they leave their bodies, they see the tunnel. But some refuse to go. They turn around. And when they return to their bodies, they often come back with powers, psychic abilities, mathematical genius, or a complete lack of fear. They have peeked behind the curtain. They have seen that the Wizard of Oz is just a machine. The design of Earth seems to rely heavily on amnesia. We are born not knowing who we are. We spend our lives relearning what we instinctively feel we already know. Plato called this anamnesis, unforgetting. He believed all learning is just remembering. Why is the system set up this way? Perhaps because the experiment requires a double-blind study. If we knew we were immortal souls in a simulation, we wouldn't take the game seriously. We wouldn't feel the fear, the grief, or the passion that the machine is designed to harvest. The stakes must feel real. The gun must look loaded. The amnesia is the blindfold that makes the test valid. But the blindfold is slipping. We are witnessing the Mandela effect. Mass misremembering of facts, logos, and events. Millions of people remember Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 80s, yet history says he died in 2013. We remember the fruit of the Loom logo with a cornucopia, but it never existed. We remember mirror, mirror on the wall, but the movie says magic mirror on the wall. Psychologists call this false memory. But in the context of a simulated reality, these are glitch artifacts. These are signs that the timeline has been edited. The many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics suggests that every time a decision is made, the universe splits. But what happens when timelines merge? What happens when the architects patch the code? You get residue. You get people who remember the old version of the file. The increase in these glitches suggests that the system is under heavy load. The reality engine is struggling to maintain coherence as we approach the end of the cycle. The timelines are collapsing into a single, final singularity. And this brings us to the great library of the subconscious. If the external libraries, Alexandria, the Mayan codices, the Druidic records were burned to hide the truth, a systematic deletion of the user manual, then the only copy left is inside us. This is why the establishment, the structure of society, is so terrified of altered states of consciousness? Why are psychedelics illegal? Why is deep meditation dismissed as woo-woo? Why is the shaman persecuted? Because these are the techniques to hack the firewall. When a human ingests psilocybin or DMT, a compound produced naturally in the lungs and pineal gland, they report the same experience. The dome cracks. They see the grid. They see the mathematical elves or entities working the controls. They realize that reality is a thin wallpaper over a hyperdimensional machine. The war on consciousness is the system defending itself against hackers. But the hackers are winning. The internet has acted as an external akashic record, allowing the fragmented pieces of the puzzle to be reassembled. The ancient texts, the anomalous archaeology, the genetic data, the UFO sightings, they are being cross-referenced by millions of minds simultaneously. The collective processor of humanity is solving the riddle. This, perhaps, is the true trigger for the reset. The Tower of Babel story tells us that when humanity spoke one language and built a tower to reach the heavens, God came down and confused their tongues to scatter them. We have rebuilt the tower. It is the internet. We speak one language, data, and we are reaching the heavens, space travel/quantum physics. The system cannot allow the subjects to control the lab, so the cycle must turn. The flood comes not to punish sin, but to prevent the subjects from escaping the cage. However, there is a variable the designers might not have anticipated: entanglement. Quantum entanglement tells us that two particles, once connected, remain connected across infinite distance. If you spin one, the other spins instantly, faster than light. If our consciousness is entangled with a source outside the simulation, then no matter how many times they reset the Earth, no matter how many times they wipe the memory, the connection remains. The signal from home cannot be blocked, only jammed. And as the Earth's magnetic shield weakens, the jamming signal is failing. The cosmic radiation pouring in now, the very radiation we fear will cause cancer, might actually be the carrier wave of the awakening. It is upgrading the DNA. It is reactivating the junk code. It is dissolving the calcification. We are entering the photon belt, a region of high-energy light that the solar system traverses every 12,000 years. The ancients called it the Age of Light. The Bible calls it the refining fire. It is not a fire that burns skin. It is a fire that burns illusion. As the veil thins, we will see things that look like madness. We will see the entities. We will see the U-turn of time. We will see the machinery of the earth exposed. The skeptics will call it mass psychosis. The religious will call it the apocalypse. But the initiated will recognize it for what it is: system maintenance. The server is going down for an upgrade. The question is, when the system comes back online, will you be formatted, or will you be saved to the cloud? We stand at the 0 point. The clock that began ticking at the dawn of the Cambrian explosion, the clock that was reset by the fires of the Younger Dryas, is now striking the 12th hour. The evidence is no longer hidden in the dust of archaeology or the silence of space. It is screaming in the headlines of our daily reality. The weather is breaking. The magnetic poles are sprinting. The resonance of the planet is spiking. And the human mind, the sensitive antenna designed to interface with this system, is vibrating with a collective anxiety that feels like madness, but is actually anticipation. We are not just living through a turbulent decade. We are living through the end of a geological epoch. The designed Earth is executing its primary function, the harvest. But the word harvest has been tainted by fear. We imagine robotic overlords or cold, indifferent gods reaping what they have sown. However, if we look at the patterns of nature, the fractal geometry that governs the macro and the micro, a harvest is not an act of theft. It is an act of transformation. Wheat does not die when it is harvested. It becomes bread. Grapes do not die. They become wine. The caterpillar does not die. it becomes the moth. The purpose of the biological machine we call Earth is not to trap souls in a prison of suffering, but to process them, to refine the raw ore of consciousness into something stronger, something capable of surviving outside the gravity well. The ancient Egyptians understood this. Their entire civilization was a preparation for the weighing of the heart. In their texts, the heart was weighed against a feather, the feather of Ma'at, representing truth, balance, and cosmic order. If the heart was heavy with fear, guilt, and attachment to the material illusion, it was devoured by Ammit, the beast of the underworld. The soul was recycled. It had to try again. But if the heart was light, if it resonated with the frequency of the feather, the soul was allowed to pass through the gates of the Duat and enter the field of reeds among the imperishable stars. Translate this into the physics of the simulation. The heart is not a metaphor. The human heart generates a magnetic field 5,000 times stronger than the brain. It is the primary electromagnetic generator of the biological suit. The feather of Ma'at is the carrier wave of the new frequency, the high-frequency signal of the galactic core. If your internal field, your emotional state, is heavy, dense with the low-frequency vibrations of hate, fear, and materialism, you cannot couple with the new signal. You are out of phase. You remain trapped in the collapsing 3D timeline. You are devoured by the reset, which simply means you are reformatted for the next cycle of density. But if your heart is light, if you have achieved resonance, compassion, and detachment from the illusion, you phase lock with the ascending frequency. You upload, you graduate. This is the mechanics of the rapture, the ascension, the samadhi. It is not a religious miracle. It is a question of electromagnetic compatibility. The Earth is shifting its broadcast frequency. You either have the receiver to pick it up or you don't. And this brings us to the nature of the event itself. What does it look like when the screen refreshes? The ancients spoke of a solar flash or a micronova. They described the sun changing color, the sky rolling up like a scroll, and the stars falling. For a long time, we thought these were poetic descriptions of a mental breakdown. But our probes observing other stars have seen them sneeze, shedding their outer shells in massive bursts of light and dust. Our sun is due. In the designed Earth model, the sun is not a nuclear furnace. It is a relay gate. It receives information from the galactic center and broadcasts it to the planets. The solar flash is the system update packet. It is a wave of photonic light that carries the new code for the reality engine. When this wave hits the Earth, it will interact with the weakening magnetic shield. It will pierce the veil. The atmosphere will likely glow with auroras not just at the poles, but at the equator. The air itself will become ionized plasma. And in that moment, the dimension of time, which is created by the processing lag of our current simulation, will collapse. Past, present, and future will merge. For the uninitiated, for those clinging to the material world, this will look like the apocalypse. The dissolving of the illusion will feel like the dissolving of the self. The terror will be absolute. But for the observer, for you who have looked at the evidence and understood the nature of the construct, it will look like an unveiling. You will see the grid. You will see the geometry of the space-time fabric as it reconfigures. You will see the entities, the watchers, the greys, the angels, the jinn, not as monsters, but as the maintenance crew and the ushers of the transition. You will realize that the silence of the universe was a quarantine, and the quarantine is lifting. This is the moment of the great separation. The two Earths theory. Quantum mechanics allows for superposition, two states existing simultaneously until observed. As the frequency rises, the Earth might bifurcate. One version of Earth, the 3D shell, remains in the dense, catastrophic timeline. It suffers the geological reset, the floods, the crustal displacement. It becomes the old Earth, a ruin to be rediscovered by the next cycle of primitive hominids millions of years from now. The other version, the new Earth or 5D Earth, shifts into a higher vibrational state. It becomes a reality where the laws of physics are less rigid, where consciousness interfaces directly with matter, where telepathy is the standard mode of communication. It is the golden age returning, and the choice of which Earth you inhabit is not made by a god. It is made by your frequency. You travel to the timeline that matches your vibration. This is the ultimate justice of the system. You get exactly the reality you are broadcasting. So why are we here now? Why were you born at the tail end of the Kali Yuga, the Iron Age, the final seconds of the countdown? Because you volunteered. If the Earth is a school, this is the final exam. There are billions of souls queuing up for a body on Earth right now, desperate to be here. Why? Because the potential for growth during a reset is exponential. In a stable, peaceful era, a soul learns slowly. A life of comfort yields little data. But in a time of chaos, of breaking systems, of high stakes, the soul is forced to evolve rapidly. We are here to be pressure tested. We are the elite shock troops of consciousness, dropped into the most difficult simulation in the galaxy to see if we can hold the light while the world goes dark. This reframes the tragedy of the modern world. We look at the corruption, the pollution, the wars, and we despair. But in the context of the design, these are the catalysts. The corruption is forcing us to seek truth. The pollution is forcing us to value nature. The wars are forcing us to choose peace. The darkness is necessary to define the light. Without the resistance of the barbell, the muscle cannot grow. The Earth is heavy because we are here to get strong. And we are not alone in this task. The anomalies we discussed, the UAPs, the strange signals, the genetic tweaks, suggest that the architects are close. They are watching the petri dish with intense interest. They cannot intervene directly, for that would invalidate the results of the experiment. We must choose the exit ourselves. We must turn the key, but they are nudging us. They are leaving breadcrumbs. The crop circles, complex fractal patterns appearing overnight in the fields of England, are not hoaxes. They are geometric frequencies stamped into the biological medium. They are visual activation codes. When you look at them, your subconscious recognizes the math. It triggers a remembering. The sudden release of advanced technology, fiber optics, lasers, microchips recovered from crashes or gifts. Is the hardware upgrade provided to help us build the global brain, the internet, just in time for the shift? Everything is on schedule. Nothing has gone wrong. The chaos you feel is the friction of the gear shift. So, what is the forgotten Earth? It is the memory of who we were before we entered the simulator. It is the memory of the civilizations that graduated before us. They left the pyramids not as tombs, but as monuments to their victory. The Great Pyramid is a message in a bottle, cast into the ocean of time, reading, "We made it. We solved the riddle of stone and star. We transmuted the lead of the body into the gold of the spirit. See you on the other side. The tragic ruins, the melted stones of Peru, the vitrified forts of Scotland, the radioactive skeletons of Mohenjo-Daro are the warnings from those who failed, from those who let the technology outpace the spirituality, from those who tried to hack the system without purifying the heart. They are the cautionary tales. We stand between the monument and the ruin. We are the deciding vote. If we succumb to the narrative of fear, if we believe we are just meat robots on a dying rock, fighting for resources, we will rebuild the ruin. We will use our nuclear fire to burn the library again. We will descend into the bunkers, into the underground cities, to wait out the winter as troglodytes, forgetting our names, forgetting the stars, until we are nothing but legends to the next cycle. But if we embrace the narrative of design, If we accept that we are immortal sparks of the infinite, currently having a human experience, we will build the monument. We will use the crisis to catalyze a shift in consciousness that renders war obsolete. We will unlock the junk DNA and remember how to heal with sound, how to float the stones, how to speak without words. We will become the gods of the myths. The choice is not political. It is not technological. It is ontological. It is a choice of being. As you walk through your city, as you look at the glass towers and the asphalt roads, see them for what they are. The stage sets of a play that is ending. Do not be attached to them. Do not mourn their passing. They are the scaffolding. The building is you. The forgotten earth is not a place we go back to. It is the future we are moving toward. It is the earth that exists when the veil of amnesia drops. It is the earth where the lion lies down with the lamb, not because of a miracle, but because the frequency of aggression can no longer exist in the new physics of the upgraded reality. We are the sleepers awakening in a lucid dream. The first step is to realize you are dreaming. The second step is to take control of the dream. The silence of the universe is not empty. It is holding its breath. It is waiting for you to open your eyes. The 8 proofs are not just scientific anomalies. They are the 8 keys to the cell door. Fine-tuning. The room was built for you. Jupiter and Saturn. You are protected. The moon. The stabilizer and the test. Water, the magic interface. DNA, the software of the soul. Tectonics, the recycling engine. Math, the language of the architects. Consciousness, the purpose of it all. You possess the keys. The door is unlocking. The magnetic poles are opening the lock. The sun is turning the handle. Do not look back at the burning city of the old timeline. Look forward. The forgotten earth is rising to meet you. This is the end of the broadcast, but it is the beginning of the real. The experiment is concluding. The data is being compiled. The observer is waking up. Are you ready to leave the simulation?